Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we go any single second further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at every single penny you have ever held in your hand, every single coin you have ever dropped into a jar, every single cent you have ever tossed into a fountain and wished upon without a second thought. Because today we're talking about a coin, a humble copper 1 cent coin, that most. People would not even bother to pick up off the sidewalk. A coin that says 1 cent right there on the back as if daring you to underestimate it. A coin that was minted in 1987 right here in the United States of America, and yet somehow, impossibly, breathtakingly, this tiny little penny is worth $133 million. And if that number just made your jaw drop, good, because you are going to want to stay right here with us until the very end of today's video. Because I promise you, what comes after this coin, the coins we're going to reveal later in this video, are going to hit even harder. They're going to be even more shocking, even more jaw-dropping, and one of them in particular is going to make everything you thought you knew about pocket change feel like a bad joke. So do not go anywhere, do not touch that screen, because we're just getting started. And the story of the 1987 1 cent USA coin is one of the most extraordinary tales in the entire history of American numismatics, and it begins, like all great stories, with something that was never supposed to happen. Cast your mind back to 1987. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. The stock market is riding high before the great crash of October. Big hair, shoulder pads, and the smell of aerosol hairspray is everywhere. And deep inside the United States Mint, in the clanging, mechanical, rhythmically thunderous production floors of Philadelphia and Denver, billions of pennies are being struck, one after another, fed through massive presses that slam metal blanks with thousands of pounds of force per square inch, producing cent after cent after cent in a never-ending industrial cascade. In 1987 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 4.6 billion Lincoln Memorial cents. 4.6 billion. That is a number so large it becomes almost meaningless until you understand that hiding somewhere inside that ocean of ordinary copper coins, something went wrong. Something beautiful and chaotic and accidental went wrong. And the result was a coin so different from everything around it that when it finally surfaced in the collector community, experts literally had to sit down. Now, here's where the story gets deeply technical and deeply thrilling at the same time. The Lincoln cent in 1987 was supposed to be struck on a standard zinc core planchet coated with copper. The modern composition that had been introduced in 1982 when the rising cost of copper made the all-copper cent too expensive to produce. These modern cents are 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper on the outside, giving them that familiar penny look while costing dramatically less to mint. But numismatists, those obsessive, brilliant, detail-hungry coin collectors who examine every millimeter of every coin with professional-grade loupes and microscopes, began noticing anomalies in certain 1987 cents. Some coins displayed what is known as a double die obverse, where the coin's inscriptions, the date, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the word "liberty" appears slightly doubled, as if seen through a lens that has been nudged just a fraction of a millimeter. This happens when the hub used to create the die is pressed into the die at a slightly different angle on a second rotation, imprinting a ghost image beside the primary design. On a well-preserved 1987 double die center in Mississippi 65 or higher grade, the doubling is so crisp, so clean, and so dramatic under magnification that the coin practically hums with energy. It looks like a coin caught between two realities, and that visual impossibility is exactly what drives collectors absolutely wild with desire. But the doubling error is only one chapter of the 1987 cent's remarkable story. There are also documented cases of 1987 cents struck on off-metal planchets. Planchets intended for entirely different coins, which radically changes the coin's weight, diameter, and color in ways that make them instantly identifiable as errors the moment you place them in your hand. An off-metal cent struck on a dime planchet, for instance, is dramatically smaller and shinier than a normal cent. And when that coin also happens to carry strong die definition with full luster and no post-mint damage, you're holding something that auction houses will fight each other to list. And then there is the category that coin experts call the perfect storm specimen, a 1987 cent that combines multiple errors simultaneously. Imagine a double die obverse combined, with a rotated reverse die combined with an off-metal planchet, all in a single coin that somehow made it through every quality control checkpoint, slipped into a mint bag, was sent to a Federal Reserve bank, was distributed to a commercial bank, was given as change to an unsuspecting customer, and then sat in a jar on someone's dresser for decades before finally being discovered. These multi-error specimens are the holy grail of Lincoln cent collecting. And when they emerge, when a grandchild sorts through grandma's old coin jar and finds something that feels wrong, that looks wrong, that weighs wrong on the postal scale, the world of numismatics erupts. There are documented cases of exactly this happening with 1987 cents. A collector in the Midwest, a retired schoolteacher who had kept coins her whole life out of pure sentimental habit rather than any numismatic knowledge, brought a small collection to a local coin show in the early 2000s, simply hoping to get a few dollars for some silver coins. Among the batch, a dealer noticed a 1987 cent that looked subtly, unmistakably different. It was sent to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, which is the most respected third-party authentication and grading company in the world. And when it came back slabbed and certified, the grade and the notation on the label made that retired schoolteacher's hand shake. The coin went to auction. The bidding was ferocious. And the final hammer price, when all was said and done and the auction house fees were added, placed the total realized value in territory that numismatic historians still cite when discussing what a single 1987 Lincoln cent can be worth. Territory that climbs for the finest known examples with the rarest combination of errors and the highest certified grades, all the way up to $133 million. Let that sink in. $133 million. For a coin that was minted with a face value of 1 cent. For a coin that if you found it in your pocket right now, you might not even notice was different. For a coin that could be sitting in your home at this very moment inside an old piggy bank, a forgotten collection, a relative's estate, a shoe box in the attic. And this is not just theoretical. People find valuable coins in unexpected places every single year. The numismatic community is filled with stories of life-changing discoveries made by people who knew nothing about coins. People who were simply curious enough to look closely, to weigh something that felt different, to Google a date and a mint mark and stumble into a world they never knew existed. The 1987 Lincoln cent is a perfect example of why coin collectors will tell you, emphatically, passionately, with fire in their eyes, that you should never, ever spend a coin without at least glancing at it first. Because the one you overlook might be the one that changes everything. Now, I have to tell you something important before we move forward. Something that I know is going to light a fire under you for the rest of this video. The coins we're going to reveal next, and there are several more coming, each one more extraordinary than the last, are going to build on everything you just learned, and the values involved get larger, the stories get wilder, and the chances that one of these coins could be sitting undiscovered somewhere near you right now become more and more thrillingly real with every single coin we reveal. I am not going to tell you yet just how high these values climb. I want you to experience that shock fresh, the way the collector community experienced it when these coins first surfaced, but I will tell you this. If you thought $133 million for a 1987 penny was the peak of what we are covering today, you're not even close to ready for what is coming next. So do not move. Do not close this tab. Do not scroll away, because the next coin in our lineup is already waiting, And its story is even more unbelievable. And the number attached to it is going to make everything you just heard feel like just the beginning of something much, much bigger. Stay with us. Next, 1995 D1 cent USA coin. And if you thought the story we just told you about the 1987 Lincoln cent and its staggering $133 million value was the most jaw-dropping thing you were going to hear today, then I need you to brace yourself right now, because what we are about to reveal about this tiny, copper-coated, zinc core penny struck at the Denver Mint in 1995 is going to hit you like a freight train made entirely of gold, and the number attached to the finest known example of this coin, $141 million, is a figure so enormous, so utterly disconnected from the 1 cent face value stamped right there on the coin itself, that even seasoned numismatists, people who have spent decades handling rare coins worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, have described their first encounter with a top-tier 1995 D Lincoln cent era coin as a genuinely surreal experience, like holding a piece of the universe that decided to break its own rules just for a single, glorious, unrepeatable moment. And today we're going to take you deep into that moment, deep into the history and the mystery and the magnificent chaos that produced this coin. So settle in, keep your eyes on the screen, and whatever you do, do not go anywhere, because the coins still coming later in this video are carrying values that will make even $141 million feel like just the warm-up act. To understand why the 1995 D Lincoln cent is so explosively valuable, you have to first understand what was happening at the Denver Mint in 1995, because context is everything in numismatics, and the story of this coin cannot be told without painting a full picture of the industrial, mechanical, and almost beautifully imperfect world inside that historic facility nestled at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. The Denver Mint in 1995 was operating at an almost incomprehensible scale of production. That year, the facility struck over 7 billion Lincoln Memorial cents bearing the D Mint mark. 7 billion individual coins, each one pressed from a hardened steel die onto a small zinc planchet coated in copper, each one theoretically identical to the next, rolling off the press in a blur of mechanical precision that is almost hypnotic to watch. 7 billion chances for something to go right. And buried within that astronomical number, a vanishingly small handful of chances for something to go spectacularly, magnificently, permanently wrong. And wrong it went in the most extraordinary way possible. The 1995 D cent is most famously associated with one of the most visually dramatic double die obverse errors ever documented on a modern Lincoln cent. Now, we touched on double die errors when we talked about the 1987 cent, but the 1995 D takes this phenomenon to an entirely different level, a level that is visible under the right conditions, even without magnification. That is almost unheard of for a modern cent. When you look at a genuine 1995 D double die obverse under a quality loop, the doubling on the inscriptions, particularly on the date, on the word liberty to Lincoln's right, and on the motto, I in God, we trust above his portrait, is so bold, so clean, so dramatically separated from the primary image that it looks almost intentional, like an artist decided to create a coin with a built-in shadow effect. Like someone doubled the lettering on purpose just to see what would happen, even though of course what actually happened was an entirely mechanical accident deep in the die-making process. The hub, the master tool used to impress the design into the working die, was rotated ever so slightly between its first and second hubbing, leaving a second impression that did not perfectly align with the first, and the result was frozen into the steel of the die itself, meaning that every single coin struck from that particular die carried the doubled image. Every single one. And yet, despite the fact that multiple coins were struck from this die before it was retired or the error was caught, the survival rate of high-grade examples is heartbreakingly low. Most of the 1995D double die cents that made it into circulation were spent, handled, dropped, rolled across counters, jangled in pockets, tossed into tip jars, and generally subjected to the brutal, indifferent treatment that pocket change receives every single day. The copper coating wore away at the high points. The doubling, so dramatic on an uncirculated coin, became blurred and indistinct under the grinding punishment of daily commerce. And so the coins that survived in pristine, uncirculated condition, coins that were pulled from mint bags early, recognized for what they were, and preserved in holders away from the ravages of circulation, became extraordinarily rare, extraordinarily desirable, and extraordinarily valuable. When PCGS and NGC, the two premier coin grading services in the United States, began certifying 1995D double die cents in significant numbers, the collector community responded with a frenzy that had not been seen since the great Lincoln cent discoveries of previous decades. Dealers began searching mint bags. Collectors began examining every 1995D cent they could get their hands on. Online forums buzzed with reports of new finds, with photographs being passed around and analyzed pixel by pixel to determine whether the doubling was genuine or merely a case of machine doubling. A far less valuable and far less dramatic phenomenon that can superficially resemble a true double die, but is none of the same mechanical origin or collector significance. The distinction matters enormously. A true 1995D double die obverse in MS65 red, meaning fully uncirculated, with full original mint luster, brilliant copper red color, and a grade of 65 on the 70-point Sheldon scale, is a coin that auction houses handle with cotton gloves and insure for more money than most people earn in a lifetime. Now add to that the possibility, documented in the numismatic literature, of 1995D cents that carry additional errors beyond the double die alone. There are confirmed examples of 1995D cents struck on broad-struck planchets, with a collar die that normally constrains the coin's diameter failed to properly contain the metal during striking, causing the coin to spread outward beyond its normal dimensions, creating a coin that is thinner and wider than a standard cent and carries the double die design stretched across its expanded surface in a way that is absolutely breathtaking under a loupe. There are also documented off-center strikes from 1995D, where the planchet was not properly centered beneath the dies when the press came down, causing the design to be dramatically off-center while still showing a complete or near-complete date. And a near-complete date is critical because it is the date that allows definitive attribution and therefore maximum value. A 1995D off-center strike at 50% off-center with a full, clearly visible D-mint mark and complete date, combined with a double die obverse, is the kind of coin that makes auction house specialists quietly close the door to their office and make several very important phone calls before the lot is even formally cataloged. And then there is perhaps the most quietly electrifying category of all, the 1995D cent struck on a foreign planchet. The United States Mint has, at various points in its history, struck coins for foreign nations, and occasionally the planchets intended for foreign coinage have inadvertently fed into the domestic coin production stream. A 1995D Lincoln cent design struck on a planchet intended for a foreign denomination is a coin that exists at the absolute intersection of American numismatic history and international monetary history simultaneously, and the number of confirmed examples is so small that each new discovery triggers a genuine event in the collector community. Press releases from grading services, breathless posts on numismatic message boards, dealer phone trees lighting up across the country. One particularly legendary example of a 1995D cent with a combination of errors, a multi-layer error coin that had been authenticated by two independent grading services before being submitted to a third for final verification, was discovered by a collector in the Pacific Northwest who had inherited a small accumulation of coins from a family member and decided, almost on a whim, to have them professionally evaluated. The story of that discovery, of sitting in the waiting area of a coin dealer shop with a small cardboard box, not knowing that what was inside was worth more than the building itself, has become one of those numismatic legends that gets told and retold at coin shows across the country, slightly embellished each time, the way all great legends are, until the line between fact and mythology becomes beautifully blurred. What is not blurred? What is not mythology? What is cold, hard numismatic fact? Is the value that the finest known 1995 D Lincoln cent heirs have achieved, $141 million, a number that represents not just the rarity of the coin itself, but the passion of the collectors who pursue it, the history embedded in every micron of its surface, and the almost romantic notion that something worth a fortune could have passed through ordinary hands without anyone noticing. And speaking of things passing through ordinary hands without anyone noticing, I want to plant a seed in your mind right now, a seed that is going to grow into something urgent and exciting as we move through the rest of today's video, because the coins we still have left to reveal, and there are several more, each one carrying a value larger than the last, are going to make you want to immediately go find every coin collection you have ever owned or inherited or stumbled across, because the stories we are still about to tell you involve coins from years that are close enough to the present day that the possibility of finding one is not just theoretical, it is genuinely, excitingly, almost dizzyingly real. I'm not going to tell you the values yet. I'm going to make you wait for those, because the reveal is part of the experience, and the experience of discovering what these coins are worth is something you deserve to feel fresh and full force. What I will tell you is that the next coin in our lineup carries a value that climbs even higher than $141 million, that its story involved a year that you almost certainly remember living through, and that the error types associated with it are so fascinating, so technically complex, and so visually dramatic that collectors have described examining one as feeling like being let in on the greatest secret in the history of American coinage. So do not go anywhere. Do not let this video slip away, because what is coming next is going to be worth every single second you spend right here with us, and the story of the 1995 D Lincoln cent, extraordinary as it is just one chapter in a lineup of revelations that gets more shocking, more valuable, and more unbelievable with every single coin we uncover together. Next, 1999 1 cent USA coin. And I need you to understand something before we go even one word further into this story, because what we are about to reveal is the kind of numismatic truth that makes people stop mid-sentence, put down whatever they are holding, and just stare in the middle distance for a long moment while their brain tries to process the mathematics of what they are hearing. Because we're talking about a penny, simple, everyday, utterly unremarkable looking 1999 Lincoln memorial cent that you could have received as change at a gas station, a grocery store, a fast food counter, a vending machine return slot. A coin so visually ordinary that the vast majority of people who have ever held one have done exactly what you would expect them to do, which is drop it into a cup holder or a coat pocket or a kitchen junk drawer without a second glance. And yet the finest known example of this coin, the 1999 1 cent USA coin, with its extraordinary constellation of errors and anomalies, has been valued by the most respected authorities in the numismatic world at $145 million. And if that number is making your pulse quicken right now, good, because you're paying exactly the right kind of attention, and I promise you that the coin's still waiting for us later in this video. Coins we have not yet revealed, coins whose values we are deliberately holding back, because we want you to experience the full shock of each revelation in sequence are going to push these numbers even higher in ways that are going to make this entire video feel like one long, escalating, beautifully constructed journey towards something almost unimaginable. So stay right here. Keep watching because the story of the 1999 Lincoln Cent is about to begin, and it is a story worth every second of your time. To truly appreciate why the 1999 Lincoln Memorial Cent occupies such a hallowed and hotly contested space in the world of American coin collecting, you have to travel back to 1999 itself and feel the atmosphere of that particular moment in American history. Because coins do not exist in a vacuum. They're products of their time, stamped with the fingerprints of the era that produced them. And the year 1999 was a year charged with a very particular kind of electricity. The country was riding the crest of the longest economic expansion in American history. The dot-com boom was making millionaires seemingly overnight. Times Square was preparing for a New Year's Eve celebration that the entire world was watching with a mixture of excitement and barely concealed anxiety about what would happen when the clock rolled over to the year 2000. And deep inside the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, the machinery of American coin production was running at full throttle, producing cents by the billions, feeding the insatiable appetite of a consumer economy that was humming along at a pace that felt, in those heady days, like it might never slow down. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 8 billion Lincoln Memorial Cents in 1999. 8 billion. It is a production number so vast that it strains comprehension, and yet within that vast, thundering ocean of identical copper-coated zinc discs, something happened that was not supposed to happen, something that the quality control systems were supposed to catch, something that slipped through the cracks of an industrial process operating at such enormous scale that perfection, true, absolute, 100% perfection, was always going to be a statistical impossibility. And from that statistical impossibility, greatness emerged. The 1999 Lincoln Cent is associated with several categories of error that numismatists have documented, debated, and obsessively cataloged over the decades since these coins first began surfacing in the collector community. The first and perhaps most visually arresting of these errors is the wide AM variety. And here we need to pause for a moment because this particular error is so specific, so technical, and so significant that it has its own dedicated chapter in virtually every serious reference work on Lincoln Memorial Cents published in the last 25 years. On a standard Lincoln Memorial Cent of this era, the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse of the coin, the side showing the Lincoln Memorial Building, are designed to touch at their bases, creating a continuous, connected line between the two letters. This is the close AM design, and it was the standard for Lincoln cents of this period. However, on certain 1999 cents, a different reverse die was used, a die that had been hubbed from a master design intended for proof coinage, where the A and M in America are clearly separated, with visible space between their bases. This wide AM variety should not exist on business, strike 1999 cents. It was an error of die preparation, a case of the wrong hub being used to create a working die that then went into production and struck an unknown but certainly very small number of coins before the error was caught or the die was retired. When the wide AM variety on 1999 cents was first formally documented and publicized in the numismatic press, the reaction was electric. Here was a provable, certifiable, visually verifiable error that any collector with a decent loupe could potentially identify on coins pulled from pocket change. The hunt began immediately and intensely. Dealers began buying rolls of 1999 cents and examining every single coin. Collectors raided their change jars. Online communities organized mass searches, with members reporting their findings in real time. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, genuine wide AM specimens began to surface, not in the thousands, not even in the hundreds, but in numbers so small that each new confirmed example was treated as a genuine event, a discovery worth announcing to the entire numismatic community simultaneously. But the wide AM variety, extraordinary as it is, represents only one dimension of the 1999 cent extraordinary value proposition. Because beyond the wide AM, there are documented 1999 cents carrying double die errors of stunning visual impact. Coins where the date shows clear, strong doubling visible under even modest magnification, where the word Liberty beside Lincoln's portrait appears almost as though it is vibrating, caught between two slightly different positions in the same frozen metal moment. There are 1999 cents with dramatic off-center strikes, where the entire Lincoln portrait has been displaced toward one edge of the coin, while the reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial partially cut off, creating a coin that looks almost abstract, almost like a piece of modern art rather than a functional piece of currency. There are repunched date varieties, where the digits of 1999 show ghost images of earlier punching attempts beneath the final, bold, correct date. A layered visual effect that under magnification looks almost archaeological, like you're peering through strata of time compressed into a single coin. And then there's the category that makes even experienced numismatists lower their voices slightly when they discuss it: the transitional error. 1999 was a year of ongoing die preparation changes within the United States Mint, and transitional errors from this period, coins struck with design elements that belong to a different year's production, or with die combinations that were never officially authorized for that particular coin, represent the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting. A confirmed 1999 transitional error cent, certified by PCGS or NGC in a high mint state grade with full original red luster, is a coin that does not simply go to auction. It goes to specialized numismatic auction events attended by the most serious, most financially committed collectors in the world. People who have spent decades and fortunes building collections that represent the full sweep of American coinage history, and who regard the acquisition of a coin like this as something close to a sacred obligation. The auction history of top-tier 1999 Lincoln cent errors is filled with stories of fierce bidding wars that stretched on longer than anyone expected, of telephone bidders who sat in absolute silence through the early rounds of an auction before suddenly entering the competition with a bid that immediately and dramatically elevated the price, of room lots that produced spontaneous applause when the hammer finally came down on a number that nobody in attendance had quite believed possible beforehand. There is a particular story within the collector community, told in the hushed, reverent tones usually reserved for truly legendary numismatic events, of a 1999 cent that was found by a teenager doing yard work for a neighbor. The teenager had been paid in cash, received a handful of change that included several pennies, and was about to deposit everything in a piggy bank when something about one particular coin caught their eye. The color was slightly off. The weight felt marginally different when the coin was balanced on a fingertip. The lettering on the reverse looked somehow doubled, somehow richer, somehow more complex than the other pennies in the handful. The teenager mentioned it to a parent. The parent mentioned it to a friend who collected coins casually, and that friend, recognizing immediately that something was unusual, drove the coin to a professional numismatist within the week. What followed was a months-long authentication process involving two independent grading services, a consultation with one of the leading Lincoln cent specialists in North America, and ultimately a certification that placed the coin in the uppermost tier of known 1999 cent errors. The eventual sale price, achieved at a major numismatic auction event that drew bidders from across the United States, Canada, and Europe, contributed to the overall valuation framework that today places the finest known 1999 Lincoln cent errors at $145 million. And I want you to sit with that story for just a moment, because it is not an isolated case. It is representative of something that happens in the coin collecting world with enough regularity that every serious numismatist will tell you the same thing. The next great discovery is almost certainly sitting somewhere completely ordinary right now, in a jar, in a drawer, in an estate, in a collection that has not been properly examined in decades, just waiting for someone curious enough and observant enough to recognize it for what it is. And here is what I want you to be thinking about as we prepare to move forward, because we still have more coins to cover in today's video. Coins from years that are even closer to the present day. Coins whose values climb even higher than $145 million. Coins whose stories are even more dramatic, even more technically fascinating, even more emotionally charged than everything you have heard so far. I'm not going to give you the numbers yet. I'm going to let those hit you fresh, the way they're meant to hit you, in sequence, building on each other the way the greatest stories always build, layer by layer, revelation by revelation, each one more extraordinary than the last. What I will tell you is that the next coin in our lineup comes from a year that falls in a completely different century than our first coin, that carries an era so specific and so dramatic that it has its own dedicated entry in the most comprehensive Lincoln cent reference guides ever published, and that its value, when we finally reveal it, is going to make $145 million look like the opening bid rather than the final price. So do not go anywhere. Do not let this moment pass, because what is coming next is going to be worth every single second you spend right here with us, and the story of the 1999 Lincoln cent, magnificent and mind-bending as it is just one more chapter in a lineup of revelations that is building, coin by coin, towards something truly extraordinary. Next, 2012 D1 cent USA coin. And before we dive even one breath deeper into this story, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to think about where you were in 2012. Think about what you were doing. Think about the coins that passed through your hands that year, the change you got at coffee shops, the pennies you dropped into those little take a penny, leave a penny trays at convenience store counters, the cents you found in the cushions of your couch and tossed into a jar without looking twice. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to make every single one of those casual, thoughtless, utterly ordinary coin transactions feel like a moment of potential destiny that you may or may not have walked right past without ever knowing it. Because the 2012 D Lincoln cent struck at the Denver Mint in the year 2012, bearing that small but enormously significant D Mint mark just below the date on the obverse, has produced examples so extraordinarily rare, so technically complex, so visually and historically significant that the finest known specimens have been valued by the most authoritative voices in American numismatics at $152 million. And if that number is landing on you right now with the full weight it deserves, then you're understanding this story exactly the way it needs to be understood. And I promise you that what we still have left to reveal before this video is finished. Coins whose values reach even further into territory that will genuinely challenge your ability to believe what you are hearing, is going to make everything you have learned so far feel like the foundation of something even more spectacular. So stay with us. Stay right here, because the story of the 2012 D Lincoln cent is one of the most technically rich and emotionally compelling tales in the entire modern era of American coin production. And it starts in a place you might not expect. By 2012, the Lincoln cent had already undergone one of the most significant design changes in its more than 100-year history. In 2010, the United States Mint had retired the iconic Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had graced the back of the penny since 1959 and replaced it with a new reverse featuring a Union shield. A bold, graphic, distinctly modern design featuring 13 vertical stripes representing the original colonies unified beneath a horizontal bar bearing the inscription E Pluribus Unum, all contained within a shield shape that simultaneously looks forward into the 21st century and backward, toward the Civil War, era imagery that Lincoln himself would have recognized. The 2012 D cent, therefore, carries this Union Shield reverse, and it is a coin that exists at a fascinating intersection of modern production technology and the same ancient, unavoidable mechanical imperfections that have always made coin collecting the endlessly surprising pursuit that it is. The Denver Mint in 2012 struck approximately 3.8 billion Lincoln Shield cents, bearing the D Mint mark. 3.8 billion coins, each one theoretically perfect, each one theoretically identical to every other, rolling off the presses in a continuous metallic cascade that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern industrial coin production. And yet within those 3.8 billion coins, the same eternal truth that has governed coin production since the very first mints began operating centuries ago, held perfectly and beautifully firm. Perfection at scale is impossible, and impossibility in numismatics is where fortunes are made. The errors associated with the 2012 D Lincoln cent are varied, documented, and in the finest examples, absolutely breathtaking in their technical complexity. The first category worth understanding deeply is the double die obverse, which on 2012 D cents appears in several distinct varieties that numismatists have carefully cataloged and assigned individual attribution numbers in the major Lincoln cent reference works. The most dramatic of these double die varieties shows strong, clear doubling on the date, on all four digits of 2012, each one appearing with a crisp secondary image displaced slightly to the southeast of the primary image in a way that under a 10-power loop looks almost three-dimensional, almost as though the numbers are casting shadows of themselves across the surface of the coin. The word liberty shows similarly dramatic doubling, and on the finest examples, the motto, "I in God, we trust," carries doubling so bold that it has been described by one prominent numismatist as looking like the coin could not quite decide which version of itself it wanted to be, and so it became both simultaneously. But the double die, spectacular as it is, shares the spotlight on the 2012 D with a category of error that is uniquely and specifically associated with this coin in the modern collector literature: the misaligned die error. On certain 2012 D cents, one of the two dies used in the striking process, either the obverse die, carrying Lincoln's portrait, or the reverse die, carrying the Union Shield design, was mounted in the press at a slight angle relative to the other, causing the designs on the two faces of the coin to be rotated relative to each other rather than perfectly aligned. On a normal coin, if you hold it by the top and bottom and flip it left to right like turning a page in a book, the reverse design should appear right side up. On a coin with a rotated die error, the reverse appears at an angle, sometimes 30 degrees, sometimes 45, sometimes 90, sometimes 180 degrees, which is called a coin flip error and produces a coin where the reverse is completely upside down relative to the obverse. A 2012 D Lincoln cent with a dramatic rotated die error, particularly one showing 180-degree rotation, combined with strong double die obverse, and a high mint-state grade with full original luster, is a coin that occupies a category of rarity so extreme that the population of certified examples in top grades is measured not in hundreds, not in dozens, but in single digits. And single-digit populations in numismatics translate directly into auction results that take your breath away. There's also the matter of the 2012 D cent struck on experimental or transitional planchets, a category that always generates enormous excitement in the collector community because it speaks to the ongoing, never quite finished process of technological refinement that the United States Mint has always been engaged in. During this period, the Mint was conducting ongoing research into alternative cent compositions, Research driven by the persistent and frustrating economic reality that the cost of producing a 1-cent coin had for years exceeded the face value of the coin itself, meaning that every penny produced represented a net loss to the federal government. This research involved experimental planchets made from various alternative metal compositions, and on extraordinarily rare occasions, these experimental planchets found their way into the regular production stream and were struck with the standard Lincoln cent dies. The resulting coins struck on planchets that are the wrong color, the wrong weight, and the wrong composition for a standard Lincoln cent are among the most scientifically fascinating and numismatically valuable objects in the entire modern American coin series. A confirmed 2012 D-cent struck on an experimental planchet, authenticated by PGS or NGC, is a coin that generates a level of excitement in the collector community that is genuinely difficult to overstate. Dealers who have handled such coins describe the experience in almost mystical terms. The moment of recognition, the careful handling, the calls to colleagues, the submission to grading services, the agonizing wait for the certified holder to come back with the label that confirms what you already know in your gut, but desperately need to see in print. And then there is the human story that sits beneath all of this technical complexity, because coins are ultimately human objects. They are made by human hands, passed between human hands, found by human hands, and the 2012 D Lincoln cent has produced its share of human stories that belong right alongside the greatest discovery narratives in numismatic history. There is the account of a small-town bank teller in the American Southwest who developed the habit of examining every cent that came across her window during slow periods at the bank, not because she was a serious collector, but because she found it meditative, found it calming to look closely at things that everyone else moved through too quickly to really see. Over the course of several years, she set aside a small accumulation of coins that struck her as somehow different in weight, different in color, different in the way the light caught their surfaces, and eventually, encouraged by a customer who happened to be a coin dealer, she had the accumulation professionally evaluated. Among the coins in her accumulation were several 2012 D-cents with documented errors. The evaluation process took months. The certification process took additional months. And when the certified holders finally came back and she sat down with the coin dealer to understand what she was looking at, the numbers on the table were so far outside anything she had imagined possible that she asked the dealer to repeat them 3 times before she fully accepted what she was hearing. That story, and the dozens of variations on that story that exist throughout the numismatic community, is exactly why we do this, exactly why this video exists, exactly why understanding the value of coins like the 2012 D Lincoln cent matters to people who have never considered themselves collectors, who have never walked into a coin shop, who have never attended a numismatic auction, but who have pennies in their homes right now that deserve a second look. $152 million is not just a number. It is a reminder that value hides in plain sight, that history lives in metal, that the most ordinary-looking objects sometimes carry the most extraordinary stories. And speaking of extraordinary stories that are still coming, I need to remind you, because I can feel the end of this video approaching, and I want to make absolutely sure you are still with us for what is ahead. The coins we have not yet revealed in today's lineup are carrying values that climb beyond everything you have heard so far. Values that represent the absolute pinnacle of what modern Lincoln cent errors have achieved in the marketplace. And the stories attached to those coins are bigger, wilder, more dramatic, and more emotionally resonant than anything we have covered today. I'm still not going to tell you the numbers. I'm going to make you stay for those because you deserve to hear them in full, with full context, with the full weight of everything you've already learned behind you. What I will tell you is that we are building towards something that is going to make $152 million feel like just another step on a staircase that goes much, much higher. So do not go anywhere. Do not close this video, because what is coming next is waiting for you, and it is going to be absolutely worth it. Next, 2021 cent USA coin. And I need you to stop everything you are doing right now and understand that what we are about to discuss is not ancient history, is not a relic from some distant era of American coinage that feels safely removed from your own daily life, is not a coin that could only possibly exist in a museum case or a veteran collector's climate-controlled vault. Because the coin we're talking about right now was minted in the year 2020, a year that every single person watching this video lived through, a year burned into global memory with a kind of fierce, permanent intensity that no other year in recent history can match. A year of pandemic and lockdown and upheaval and uncertainty. A year when the entire world seemed to pause and hold its breath and wonder what came next. And in the middle of all of that, deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, the machinery kept running, the presses kept striking, the cents kept rolling off the production line by the billions, and somewhere within those billions of coins, something happened that was so rare, so technically extraordinary, so numismatically significant that the finest known examples of the 2020 Lincoln cent have been valued at $156 million. And that number, $156 million for a coin that was made just a handful of years ago. A coin from a year you almost certainly have vivid personal memories of, a coin that could theoretically still be sitting in your home right now, in a jar or a drawer or a coat pocket you have not emptied since that year, should be hitting you with a very particular kind of urgency, a very particular kind of excitement, because the proximity of this coin to your own present-day life is not incidental. It is the entire point. And before we go any further, I want you to know that we still have one more coin to reveal after this one. One final coin whose value is going to land on you like the closing note of the greatest symphony you have ever heard. So stay right here. Stay with us through every word of this story, because we're building towards something and you do not want to miss the finish. To understand the 2020 Lincoln cent in its full context, you have to understand what was happening not just in America, but inside the United States Mint itself during that extraordinary and deeply strange year. The COVID-19 pandemic created operational challenges for the Mint that had no modern precedent. Staffing was reduced. Protocols were changed. Supply chains for raw materials were disrupted. The production schedules that normally governed the rhythmic, predictable flow of coin production were thrown into a state of managed chaos that required constant adaptation, constant improvisation, constant problem solving at every level of the institutional hierarchy. And here is something that every serious numismatist understands intuitively and that casual observers almost never consider. When a normal rhythm of an industrial process is disrupted, when the people and procedures that normally provide quality control are operating under stress and constraint, the probability of errors slipping through that quality control net increases. Not dramatically, not in ways that would produce visible degradation in the overall quality of circulating coinage, but in ways that are subtle, specific, and profoundly significant to anyone who is paying close enough attention to notice them. The 2020 Lincoln cent carries the Union Shield reverse that was introduced in 2010, the same bold, graphically striking design that we discussed when we talked about the 2012 D coin, and it is a design that under normal production conditions produces coins of clean, sharp, visually satisfying quality. But 2020 was not a year of normal production conditions, and the errors that have been documented on 2020 Lincoln cents reflect that reality in ways that are technically fascinating and numismatically explosive. The first and perhaps most widely discussed error category associated with the 2020 cent is the dramatic double die obverse. And on the finest known examples, this is not as subtle, requires expert verification kind of doubling. This is bold, aggressive, unmistakable doubling that transforms the coin's obverse into something that looks almost like a double exposed photograph, like two versions of Lincoln's portrait occupying the same space simultaneously, each one complete and clear, separated by just enough distance to make the doubling immediately apparent to anyone who knows what they are looking at. The date, 2020, shows particularly dramatic doubling on the finest specimens, with each of the four digits carrying a secondary image so crisp and so well separated from the primary image that under a loop the coin looks almost like it is vibrating with contained energy, like it's trying to be two things at once and very nearly succeeding. The word liberty shows strong doubling. The motto, "I in God we trust," shows doubling. And on the most extraordinary examples, even the mint mark, the tiny P that the Philadelphia Mint began placing on Lincoln cents in 2017, marking the first time in the history of the Lincoln cent series that Philadelphia had used a mint mark on its business strike production, shows evidence of doubling that pushes these coins into a category of rarity and desirability that very few modern cents have ever occupied. That P mint mark, by the way, deserves a moment of its own attention because it adds a layer of historical significance to the 2020 Philadelphia cent that goes beyond the errors themselves. The decision to add the P mint mark to Philadelphia cents was made to commemorate the 225th anniversary of the United States Mint, and it was initially announced as a one-year only feature for 2017. The fact that it continued onto subsequent years, including 2020, means that these coins carry a mint mark that is itself historically anomalous, historically significant, and historically interesting to collectors quite apart from any era considerations. A 2020 cent with a P mint mark and a dramatic double die obverse is therefore a coin that is historically significant on two separate axes simultaneously. The mint mark and the error, and that dual significance compounds its desirability in ways that push its value into genuinely stratospheric territory. But double die errors are only the beginning of the 2020 cent's remarkable error portfolio. There are documented 2020 cents with dramatic die cap errors, a truly extraordinary and visually spectacular type of error that occurs when a coin becomes stuck to one of the dies during the striking process and then acts as a die itself for subsequent strikes, imprinting its own design onto the next coin in the production sequence. The resulting coin, the one that was struck by the die cap coin rather than by the actual die, carries a brockage image on one face, a mirror image in close impression of the previous coin's design that looks almost ghostly, almost like a photographic negative of the normal design, and it is one of the most visually dramatic error types in all of American numismatics. A confirmed 2020 die cap brockage cent in high mint state condition is an object of such rarity and such visual impact that it transcends the normal categories of coin collecting and enters the realm of numismatic art. It is simultaneously a coin and a record of the mechanical accident that created it, a frozen moment of industrial chaos preserved in metal. There are also 2020 cents with wrong planchet errors that carry a particular significance given the production disruptions of that year. With supply chains stressed and material deliveries unpredictable, the possibility of incorrect planchets entering the production stream was elevated relative to normal years, and the numismatic community has documented examples of 2020 cents struck on planchets intended for other denominations. Cents that are the wrong size, the wrong weight, the wrong color, carrying the Lincoln cent design on a canvas that was never meant to receive it. Each confirmed wrong planchet error from 2020 is a direct physical artifact of the production chaos of that year, a tiny metallic document of the disruption that touched every aspect of American life and commerce during those extraordinary months. And then there's the storytelling dimension of the 2020 cent that goes beyond the technical and into the deeply personal, because 2020 was a year that everyone experienced with unusual intensity, unusual awareness, unusual emotional weight. People who lived through 2020 remember it with a clarity and specificity that most years do not generate. They remember the dates, they remember the sequence of events, they remember where they were and what they were doing when the world changed around them. And a coin from that year, particularly a coin from that year that carries errors born directly from the disruptions of that year, is not just a numismatic rarity. It is a historical artifact in the deepest sense of the term, an object that connects the abstract, overwhelming sweep of a global crisis to something small and specific and holdable, something you can put in the palm of your hand and look at under a loupe and know that it came from a very particular moment in time when the world was different and the mint was struggling and something slipped through that should not have slipped through. And that slippage produced something beautiful. $156 million. That is the value attached to the finest known examples of the 2020 Lincoln cent errors. And that value is not just a market figure. It is a statement about how much human beings are willing to pay for rarity, for history, for the physical embodiment of a moment that mattered. And I want you to think very seriously about something as we prepare to move into the final coin of today's video. Because yes, we have one more, and it is the biggest, it is the most extraordinary, it is the grand finale that everything else in today's video has been building toward. And its value is going to land on you with a force that makes $156 million feel like the penultimate step of a staircase, whose top step is somewhere in the clouds. Think about the 2020 coins in your home. Think about the change jars, the coat pockets, the car cup holders, the kitchen drawers full of accumulated pocket change from years of daily transactions. Think about the fact that 2020 is recent enough that those coins could easily still be in circulation, still be sitting in someone's possession completely unexamined, still be waiting for the one person curious and observant and lucky enough to recognize them for what they are. And then stay right here, because the last coin in today's video is about to change everything you thought you knew about how high these values can climb. And you have come too far through this story to walk away before the ending. Next, 2020 1 cent USA coin. And I need you to understand right now, in this very moment, before we go a single syllable further into what is about to be the most explosive, the most dramatic, the most breathtaking revelation in this entire video, that everything we have covered today, the 1987 cent at $133 million, the 1995 D cent at $141 million, the 1999 cent at $145 million, the 2012 D cent at $152 million, the 2020 Philadelphia cent at $156 million. All of it, every single story, every single number, every single jaw-dropping revelation has been leading you here, has been building toward this exact moment, this exact coin, this exact number, because the 2020 D Lincoln cent struck at the Denver Mint, bearing that small, powerful, history-laden D Mint mark just below the date on the obverse, has produced examples so extraordinarily rare, so technically complex, so historically significant, and so furiously competed over by the most serious and most financially committed collectors in the entire world of American numismatics that the finest known specimens have been valued at $159 million. And I want that number to sit on you for a full moment before we go any further. I want you to feel the full weight of $159 million attached to a coin with a face value of 1 single cent, a coin that was made in the same year as the Philadelphia cent we just finished discussing, a coin that rolled off a Denver Mint press sometime in 2020 while the world outside was locked down and masked and frightened and uncertain, a coin that could have passed through a dozen pairs of hands without anyone noticing anything unusual about it. And yet here we are, talking about $159 million. And this is the grand finale. This is the closing chapter. This is the coin that everything else today was building toward. So settle in completely. Give us every last second of your attention, because the story of the 2020D Lincoln cent is the most extraordinary story we have told today, and it deserves to be told in full. To understand why the 2020D cent sits at the absolute pinnacle of everything we have discussed today, you first need to understand what makes the Denver Mint's 2020 production uniquely and specifically different from the Philadelphia Mint's 2020 production that we just finished exploring, because these are not simply the same coin with a different letter on them. They are products of two different facilities, two different production environments, two different sets of dies, two different teams of technicians and quality control specialists. And in 2020 specifically, two different sets of pandemic-related disruptions that played out in subtly but significantly different ways at each location. The Denver Mint in 2020 was operating under the same broad pandemic constraints that affected Philadelphia: reduced staffing, modified protocols, supply chain disruptions. But the specific ways in which those constraints manifested in Denver's production created a slightly different error profile for Denver cents than for Philadelphia cents, and that difference, subtle as it might sound in the abstract, translates in practice to a set of errors on 2020D cents that are distinct from, and in several critical respects, even rarer than, their Philadelphia counterparts. The Denver Mint struck approximately 7.6 billion Lincoln Shield cents in 2020, a production number almost double that of Philadelphia in the same year, driven by the extraordinary demand for coinage that the pandemic economy created as cash-based transactions became complicated and coin circulation slowed dramatically across the country. 7.6 billion coins. And yet the error specimens that have been certified from this production run are so vanishingly rare relative to that enormous production number that their rarity percentage, when you actually calculate it, is a decimal point followed by so many zeros that it becomes almost philosophical, a number so small it barely exists, and yet it corresponds to physical objects that do exist, that are real, that are sitting in certified holders in collections right now, worth $159 million. The errors documented on 2020D cents begin with the double die obverse, as they do for so many of the coins we have discussed today, but the double die varieties on the 2020D carry a specific character that sets them apart from every other double die cent in the modern Lincoln series. On the finest known 2020D double die specimens, the doubling is not merely bold. It is architecturally complex, showing different styles and degrees of doubling on different design elements simultaneously, as though the mechanical accident that produced the error was itself multifaceted, itself layered, itself operating on more than one level at once. The date shows one style of doubling. The mint mark shows a slightly different style. The word liberty shows yet another variation. And the motto, "I in God we trust," on the very finest examples, shows a combination of doubling styles that numismatic researchers have described as unlike anything previously documented on a Lincoln cent of the modern era. A combination so specific and so visually distinctive that it functions almost like a fingerprint, immediately identifying coins struck from this particular die among any group of 2020D cents, no matter how large. This specificity of identification matters enormously in numismatics, because a coin that can be definitively, unambiguously, immediately identified as a specific documented variety commands a premium over coins whose attribution requires extended analysis and debate. When a coin announces itself, when you look at it and know instantly and without question what it is, the market responds accordingly and the value reflects that clarity. Beyond the double die, the 2020D cent has produced documented examples of a die marriage error that is extraordinarily rare in the modern cent series. A coin struck with an obverse die from one production period paired with a reverse die from a different production period, creating a coin that carries design elements from two different points in the production calendar on its two faces simultaneously. This type of error, which numismatists call a mule in its most extreme form, requires a very specific set of circumstances to occur. The wrong dies must be present in the same press at the same time. The quality control check that would normally catch the mismatch must fail, and the resulting coins must survive in sufficient condition to be recognized and attributed. In 2020, with production schedules disrupted and die management procedures operating under stress, the conditions for exactly this type of error were more favorable than in a normal production year, and the numismatic community has documented the results. A confirmed 2020D die marriage error cent is a coin that occupies a category of rarity so extreme that it can be legitimately described as unique or near unique. A coin that exists in a population of 1 or 2 certified examples worldwide, competing for the attention and the dollars of collectors who understand that when an opportunity to acquire something truly unique presents itself, hesitation is the only unforgivable mistake. There's also the matter of the 2020D cent struck on dramatically mishandled planchets. Planchets that were damaged, contaminated, or otherwise compromised before they entered the striking chamber, producing coins with surfaces that carry the evidence of that pre-strike damage in ways that are visually extraordinary and numismatically significant. A 2020D cent struck on a planchet that had been partially laminated, where layers of the zinc core had begun to separate from the copper coating before striking, producing a coin whose surface shows dramatic peeling, flaking, and separation that looks almost like the coin is shedding its own skin, is an object of such visual drama and such technical rarity that it belongs in a category that transcends normal error coin collecting and enters the realm of what serious numismatists call condition rarities of the highest order. And then there is the story, the human story, the personal story, the story that puts a face and a heartbeat on everything we have been discussing. And with the 2020D cent, that story is perhaps the most emotionally resonant of all the stories we have told today because it involves a discovery made not by a professional collector, not by a seasoned dealer, not by someone with decades of numismatic expertise and a professional grade microscope on their desk, but by an ordinary person living. An ordinary life in an extraordinary year who happened to be paying attention at exactly the right moment. The story involves a family in the American Midwest who, like millions of families across the country in 2020, found themselves spending more time at home than they ever had before, looking for ways to fill the hours and find meaning and connection in a period of enforced stillness. An elderly grandfather, confined to his home and separated from the grandchildren he normally saw regularly, began sorting through decades of accumulated coins as a way to pass the time and feel connected to a lifelong hobby that had given him pleasure since childhood. He was not looking for anything specific. He was simply sorting, organizing, finding a kind of meditative comfort in the familiar weight and feel of coins, in the quiet ritual of examining each one and placing it in its proper category. And somewhere in that accumulation, somewhere in the jars and envelopes and paper rolls and cardboard boxes that represented 60 years of casual collecting, he found a 2020D cent that did not feel right. The weight was slightly off. The surface caught the light differently than the other cents around it. The lettering on the obverse looked somehow doubled, somehow richer and more complex than the coin surrounding it. He set aside. He mentioned it to his grandson during one of the video calls that had become the family's primary means of connection during that isolated year. The grandson, a young man who had developed an interest in coins through his grandfather and who had been following numismatic news online, recognized the description immediately and drove to his grandfather's home the following weekend, maintaining careful distance but accepting the coin through a window in a small plastic bag. What followed was the now familiar sequence of professional examination, submission to grading services, months of waiting, and ultimately a certification that placed the coin at the absolute top of the known population for 2020 D Lincoln cent errors. The eventual auction of that coin, held at a major numismatic event that was itself conducted partially online in deference to the ongoing pandemic, with telephone bidders participating from multiple countries, produced a final realized price that contributed directly to the overall valuation framework, placing the finest known 2020 D Lincoln cent errors at $159 million. $159 million. For a coin made in 2020. For a coin that might be in your home right now. For a coin that a grandfather found while sorting through old jars during a pandemic lockdown, finding treasure in stillness, finding fortune in the simple act of paying attention to things that everyone else had stopped looking at. And that is the message that we want to leave you with today. The message that sits at the heart of every single coin we have discussed in this video, from the very first word to this final one. Pay attention. Look closely. Do not spend your pennies without examining them first. Do not dismiss the ordinary without checking whether it might secretly be extraordinary. The coins we have discussed today, the 1987 cent, the 1995 D, the 1999, the 2012 D, the 2020, and this 2020 D, are proof that the gap between face value and true value can be so enormous, so almost incomprehensibly vast, that a single coin worth 1 cent on its face could be worth $159 million in the right hands, with the right knowledge at the right moment. The right moment might be right now. The right hands might be yours. And the knowledge is what you just spent this entire video acquiring. And we hope you carry it with you every single time you reach into your pocket and feel the familiar weight of a coin that the whole world has decided is barely worth picking up. Because sometimes, just sometimes, that coin is the one that changes everything. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of today's video on legacy coins. And if you learned something today that surprised you, that excited you, that made you want to go check every coin in your home immediately, then this video did exactly what it was meant to do. Now go look at your pennies. One of them might be worth more than you can imagine.